Hi, I'm Anya O'Brien. I'm a planetary scientist at the University of Glasgow, and I'm originally from Newcastle upon Tyne. I'm here in my flat with my other half, Rob, who I've actually recruited to get involved. So you'll be seeing he and I's work together to make our own little rocket. So we've got our little Lego astronaut of Mae Jemison here, and we're going to make her a rocket. So we have just scrounged together some recycling that's built up during this lockdown period. A lot of drinks cans, we've got egg boxes. We're going to make use of a Easter egg box as well. And we're just going to show you how you at home might want to build together your own little rocket. So how are we going to start?
Well, so the main tube of a rocket is normally made of aluminium, which is really handy because these drinks cans are also made out of aluminium. So the materials we have here are fairly similar to what a real rocket is made of. So what I would suggest we start with is to build the structure, the fuselage of the rocket.
It's a posh word.
Thanks.
Fuselage? What do you mean by fuselage?
The fuselage is the main body. It's the main body of an aircraft as well, but it could also be the main body of a rocket. It's the main structure, the material that you see.
So do you want to tell us, Rob, about what rockets are made of, how they work, and why they need to be the sort of size that they are?
So what rockets have to do is escape the gravity of the Earth. And so they need a lot of fuel because they need a lot of energy to do that. So that's why they're so big, because for a tiny bit of mass, a tiny bit of stuff they want to put into space, they need to have lots of energy to be able to escape from the Earth's gravity. And the way that they do that is they burn stuff. They burn propellant in a rocket engine, and they fire it out the back of the engine, and that propels the rocket forwards. So that's why they have engines at the bottom, and the rest of that material, the rest of the rocket, is basically tanks for storing that propellant that it then burns.
So most of our rocket is just fuel, basically. Most of the inside is just full of stuff we're going to burn.
They're almost entirely just fuel. About 80 to 90% of the mass is fuel. 80 to
90%, wow. Okay, so most of our rocket we're going to build today, you've got to imagine it's going to be full of fuel if we were ever going to send it off to the moon or Mars. And a very small amount of it is going to be where our little gal, Mae Jemison, is going to be hanging out. So my research as a planetary scientist is all about Mars. I'm trying to understand whether the red planet has or ever had the right ingredients for life as we kind of know it to form. Life on Earth requires carbon as the main element to form. Everything that we know about on Earth requires carbon. All the life, every living thing is based on big, complicated molecules based around carbon, be it DNA, everything like that. And I'm trying to understand whether Mars has enough carbon, and maybe in the correct kind of forms, whether Mars actually had it and therefore had the right conditions for life to have ever formed. And the way I do that is I look at meteorites from Mars. So these are rocks that have splashed off the Martian surface when another meteorite has impacted onto Mars. So something's come flying through space, hit Mars and caused a big splash. And that big splash of rocks has randomly, some of them, ended up here on Earth. And we know that these rocks, these meteorites, are from Mars because rocks kind of act like sponges. They kind of trap the air and the stuff around them in the same way that a sponge draws in water from around it. And it turns out that the atmosphere or the air on Mars has a really, really characteristic or really well identifiable fingerprint. Basically what it's made of is really distinct and is nothing like anywhere else in the solar system. So when we pick up these meteorites, we can tell they're from Mars because there's little pockets of gas trapped in them that matches exactly what the rovers on Mars basically taste the atmosphere and find it to be made of, and it's made of the exact same stuff. So we need rovers to go to Mars to explore it, to actually see what's going on the planet and do stuff that's a lot more complicated and than what we can do with meteorites. And the way we get there is through rockets. So here is my model of the Saturn V rocket. This is the rocket that took humans to the moon. So, for example, back in 1969, when Neil Armstrong went to the moon with his team, this is the rocket they went in. Obviously, it was much, much bigger. This is just a scale model. So my research, I said I look for organic molecules or carbon-based molecules, because that's what life as we know it needs, in these tiny bits of Martian meteorite. We have very few bits of Mars. It's pretty rare that these splashes of Mars end up here on Earth, and these samples are so precious, they're basically priceless. So I need to basically develop techniques that require very little bit, a very small amount of Mars to actually figure that out. So I do things like fire lasers and X-rays at tiny bits of Mars. I'm talking about less than a gram here, to try and look for signs that there's carbon in there. My research is going to really help the ExoMars mission. The ExoMars rover, or the Rosalind Franklin rover, is going to be heading to Mars in a rocket that we call the Proton rocket. This rocket is about 53 meters high. So if, for example, the Tyne Bridge is about 59 meters high, so it's just a bit shorter than the Tyne Bridge is above the river. So pretty tall. And this rocket weighs, with all the fuel inside, weighs about 700 tons. So your average small car weighs about a ton, so it's got the weight of 700 cars. And most of that is going to be fuel, taking our little rover all the way to Mars. One great thing about planetary science is that it's really interdisciplinary. What I mean by that is my work involves physics, it involves geology, it involves chemistry, it involves biology, and I have to assemble a team of experts from all these different areas, because to be working in space, it's not about being a genius at everything. For me, my life, my work basically revolves around finding lots of other people who specialize in a really specific thing and being able to work with them. It's the teamwork, it's the communication that's so important for me to basically get them to teach me what I need to understand a bit of biology, a bit of physics, a bit of chemistry, a bit of geology, to piece that all together to understand what it means for searching for life on Mars. So in our lovingly crafted rocket, we put my Lego Mae Jemison in there. Now, she was the first female African-American in space, and she's a real role model of mine. I am so passionate about the need for the space sector, the space industry, to be super diverse and really inclusive to people no matter what their background. And I think Mae Jemison just really reflects that. She went to university at 16 and studied science and did a Bachelor of Arts in African American Studies. And then she went on to become a GP. So she was a doctor for a few years. Then she volunteered in the Peace Corps in Africa. And then she went on to be the first female African American in space. And she was doing amazing research in the 90s on bone marrow and its effects in space. Because when you're in microgravity, you lose mass in your bones effectively. And there's a lot of cool medical research that's done to basically simulate bone marrow, bone-based diseases by seeing what happens to astronauts when they're in space. And one thing there's a quote from Mae Jemison that I think really sums up this whole activity of making a rocket out of whatever you can find in your recycling bin. And here's this quote from Mae Jemison. It goes like this: "Don't let anyone rob you of your imagination, your creativity, or your curiosity. It's your place in the world. It's your life. Go on and do all you can do with it and make it the life you want to live."